Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we are going to be taking a look at perception theory.
Perception theory.
Yes, it's this really interesting area where neuroscience and psychology kind of come together
Yeah.
to try and understand how our brains process visual information, especially its emotional impact.
Right.
And the truly intriguing part is that we often react to what we see before conscious thought kicks in.
Yeah.
And it's like our decisions, opinions, even actions can be driven by this subconscious processing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of wild. And we've got excerpts from a chapter in Perception Theory by Amory Berry,
Okay.
and what looks like prep notes for a podcast episode
Interesting.
called Seeing Through the Mind, Unveiling Perception Theory.
Okay.
So get ready to understand how visual communication really works.
It's not just what meets the eye.
Right, exactly.
It's about what happens in those milliseconds between seeing and reacting.
Yeah, so let's define perception theory.
Go.
What's the core idea here?
So perception theory really dives into how neurology and psychology can be used to explain how our brains actually deal with visual information.
Okay.
Barry makes a really good point in that she emphasizes that to understand visual communication, we need to align our thinking with how the brain actually works, not just rely on assumptions.
She even quotes neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga,
Oh, yeah.
who said, "How the brain enables the mind is the question to be answered in the 21st century."
A big question.
Or-
Huge question.
But such a good one, though.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to the complexity of what we're dealing with
Absolutely.
when we talk about visual communication and perception.
Yeah. Have you ever felt drawn to an image or an ad for no real reason?
All the time.
You can't really put your finger on it, but you're just like, oh.
Absolutely.
Perception theory sheds light on that, right?
It does, yeah.
It's wild.
It's fascinating stuff.
So it's not just seeing, it's our brain's almost instant reaction to what we see.
Yeah, and that's a good point because, and the Seeing Through the Mind notes, they highlight this point that our initial response to an image is often emotional.
Right.
And happens faster than conscious thought.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Yeah, it really is.
Imagine a powerful ad that immediately stirs up some kind of emotion in you. That's your brain's emotional system
Totally.
kicking into gear, right?
And this is actually completely in line with Barry's assertion that our responses to visuals, they could be processed and acted upon without ever actually reaching our conscious awareness.
Whoa, that's kind of creepy.
It is, right?
But also amazing at the same time.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder how much control we really have
Oh, yeah.
over our own reactions. It's like, whoa.
It's a bit unsettling, I have to say.
So this emotional response, this is happening in everybody, right?
Yeah.
But are certain groups more vulnerable to this?
Yeah, for sure. Think about children and teens. Their reasoning skills are still developing, right? So that makes them particularly vulnerable to these emotion-driven visual appeals.
So it's like their brains are prioritizing the emotional impact over the logical assessment.
You got it. And that's why, this is one of the reasons why understanding perception theory is really crucial.
Absolutely.
Especially in today's incredibly visually saturated world.
Right.
We're bombarded with images constantly.
Okay, so we're seeing how crucial these emotions are in visual perception.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into broader communication theories?
That's a great question.
Barry argues that any effective communication theory has to be compatible with what neuroscience is telling us about the brain.
Yeah.
So are we saying that older models, which assumed we responded to images consciously and logically, are we saying those are outdated?
That's exactly what Barry's suggesting, yeah.
Okay.
We need to move beyond those more simplistic models and really embrace a more nuanced understanding.
The Seeing Through the Mind podcast notes, they have a perfect example of this. Social media platforms.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
They use all this crazy visually stimulating content
All the time.
to grab our attention and to trigger emotional responses.
Almost like they're designed to, right?
Yeah, which often influence our behavior unconsciously.
It's true, yeah.
It's like, oh my God, it's scary.
Yeah, it can be.
But if we understand perception theory, we can become more aware, more discerning users of social media.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about becoming a more conscious consumer of visual information.
Yeah.
In all aspects of our lives, really.
Absolutely. So it's almost like we need to develop a sixth sense, a sense of visual awareness.
Yeah.
We can't just shut our eyes to the world, though, can we?
No, not really.
So how do we do this?
Well, I think we can cultivate visual awareness.
Yeah.
And that's where those critical media literacy skills come in.
So learning to analyze and question the images
Yeah.
that we see every day? Like,
Mhm.
what emotions do they evoke? What messages are they conveying? Even subtly.
Yeah, exactly. When you start to really think about those things, you uncover so much that you wouldn't have even realized was there before.
So perception theory isn't just about advertising and social media, right?
No, not at all.
There's got to be other applications.
Oh, yes, definitely. The podcast notes mention education,
Okay.
and it's a really good point because visuals can be incredibly powerful in education, particularly when they're able to evoke an emotional response from students.
So educators who understand these principles can design like their materials to really resonate with students
Yeah.
and make learning more engaging.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
It's all about how these visual elements can really enhance the learning experience.
That's so cool.
And the podcast notes also mention mental health therapy as well.
Really?
Yeah, where visuals can help patients actually access and process their subconscious emotions.
Whoa.
It's incredible.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff.
Wow, that's so interesting. So it's like understanding how we perceive and respond to visuals could be like a powerful tool for healing and self-discovery.
Absolutely, yeah. But really tapping into that power of visual communication,
Mm-hmm.
I think we can achieve some really remarkable results in many different fields.
That makes me think, like, how much of what we perceive is actually influenced by factors beyond our immediate control?
That's a great question.
Like, are there underlying mechanisms at play that shape our visual experience without us realizing it?
Yeah, I think so. And that question takes us into the realm of cognitive biases.
Okay.
Our brains are wired to take shortcuts,
Mm-hmm.
to make quick judgments
Right.
based on limited information.
Right.
And that can lead to these biases in how we perceive and interpret visual information.
Okay, so, like, give me an example of a cognitive bias that's, like, related to perception theory.
Sure. One well-known example is what's called the framing effect.
Okay.
And it shows how the way information is presented or framed can significantly influence our choices and judgments, even if the underlying information itself stays the same.
So it's not just the image itself,
Right.
but also, like, the context in which it's presented.
Exactly, yeah. The context, the surrounding information, even things like the colors and the composition
Right.
can all subtly nudge our perception
Mm.
in a particular direction.
This is starting to sound a bit like mind control.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if these biases are happening subconsciously,
Yeah.
are we really in control of our own perceptions and decisions?
I think that's a really valid concern.
Yeah.
But I also think awareness is the first step towards taking back some control.
Okay.
Once you understand these biases, you can start to recognize them and make more conscious choices.
Right.
So, for example, understanding that framing effect we talked about might make you a little bit more critical of how information is presented,
Right.
like in the news or in advertising.
So it's not about, like, eliminating these biases altogether,
No, I don't think so.
but just being aware of them?
Right, and their potential influence.
Okay.
And then making, hopefully, more informed decisions
Right.
based on that awareness.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
It's interesting stuff, isn't it?
It really is. Like, we're finally lifting the curtain
Yeah.
on how visual information really affects us.
I think so, yeah.
I'm starting to see the world in a whole new way.
I think that's the beauty of knowledge and exploration.
Yeah.
It expands our understanding and challenges our assumptions.
But if visual information can be so persuasive, even manipulative,
Right.
how do we make sure we're using it ethically, responsibly?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
It's about being mindful
Yeah.
of the power of visual communication
Yeah.
and using it for good,
Okay.
for education, for empowerment, for positive change.
So what does that look like in practice?
That's a good question.
Like, how do we use this knowledge to become more conscious consumers of visual information?
Yeah.
Not just in our personal lives, but in our work, our communities, society as a whole.
Well, I think it starts with education
Okay.
and awareness.
Yeah.
We need to give people the tools to analyze visual information
Yeah.
critically, to understand those underlying mechanisms, and to make informed choices.
So we need to teach them about, like, framing effects, cognitive biases, and the power of emotional appears.
Exactly.
It's like we need to cultivate this society of
Yeah.
visually literate people
Yeah.
who can, like, navigate this crazy visual world
That's a great way to put it.
with discernment and with responsibility.
Exactly.
It's like, We need a visual ethics code almost, like guidelines for how to use visual information in
Yeah.
a way that respects the viewer,
Yeah.
promotes understanding, avoids manipulation.
I think that's a great way to frame it.
Yeah.
We need to have these conversations about the ethical implications of visual communication
Right.
and establish these guidelines for how to use it responsibly.
This is a lot to consider, but it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's like we're being given the keys to unlock all this hidden potential of visual communication.
And with that power
Right.
comes
To
responsibility.
use it wisely.
Exactly.
I feel like we're at this point now where visual literacy is becoming so important.
Yeah.
Like understanding these principles isn't just some, niche thing.
Right.
It's like a fundamental skill for navigating the world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
We're just living in this world that is completely saturated with images
Yeah.
all the time.
All the time.
So it's more important than ever to equip ourselves with the tools to actually understand them.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive on perception theory,
Yeah.
what's the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest thing is just remembering that visual information has this immense power,
Right.
and it's often operating beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Like we don't even realize it.
Right. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
It is a bit unsettling, but it's also fascinating.
But it just means that, we're constantly being influenced, whether we realize it or not. But, just because we're being influenced doesn't mean we have to reject visual information. It just means we need to be more conscious about it.
Exactly, yeah.
So to our listeners, now that you've heard all this about perception theory,
Yeah.
what's one thing you're going to pay closer attention to in your own life?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what stands out to you.
Well, I'm definitely going to be more mindful of, the emotional impact of the images I see. Like, what emotions are these images evoking in me? What messages are they conveying?
Right.
Even unintentionally.
Yeah, those are such good questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And remember, this is a journey. The more we learn about how our brains process information,
Right.
the more we understand perception.
This has been a great conversation.
It really has.
Thanks so much for sharing your expertise.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's always great to explore this stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you learned something new.
We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. And until next time, keep exploring.